We are going to be looking at creepy videos on the internet, strange and odd news stories, and as always, let's go ahead and get right into today's video. Well, today is Sunday, or it's Sunday where I'm from anyway, and what that means is every Sunday I like to take a look at the obscure internet mysteries iceberg, pull some of these apart, and analyze them. You know, I really like that word obscure. If I were to just say internet mysteries, you all would be like, eh. But when you put obscure in front of it, then it's like, oh yes. Anyway, I don't know what I'm talking about. Let's just go ahead and continue on with the iceberg. Let us go right here to where it says, Dahmer as a shapeshifter. I always found this to be pretty thought-provoking. People would make videos and make posts on the internet saying how they thought Dahmer looked different in every photo that was released of him. They really couldn't explain how or why, but he just looked different more so than other people in every photo. Now this I thought could be attributed to weight gain, weight loss, and even age. You can even see Reddit posts here that go 10 months back where people are saying, Jeffrey looks like a completely different person in each photo. Anyone notice how jarringly different Jeff looked during trial versus while imprisoned? There are even people responding to these original posters by saying he looked different in every picture he'd ever been in somehow. So there are a lot of people in agreement, but again, the logical explanation is that there are many different factors that can make people look different. Even stress. Stress can definitely age you and do a number to your face. But the reason why this is on the obscure internet mysteries iceberg has to do with a news article that came out in the early 90s from the Chicago Tribune. This news article is titled, Dahmer Escapee Tells of Close Call. The news article starts with the man who ended the worst serial crime in Wisconsin history told jurors Friday he saw Dahmer change from a normal everyday person to a chanting, rocking terrorizer who held a knife to his chest and threatened him. But here's where things get a little bit more interesting when you read this part right here. The two men had been friendly, said Edwards, who was considering Dahmer's offer of $100 to pose for nude photos, but that abruptly ended when Dahmer focused Edwards' attention on a fish tank and then handcuffed him and produced a large military-style knife. Suddenly, Edwards said Dahmer's face seemed different. His body structure, he was like a totally different guy. Now, I can see somebody having a different facial expression that makes them appear meaner or angrier than what they originally looked like, but this guy says he just looked completely different, right down to his body structure. I mean, have you heard another story or another crime case, where a person says that this individual they were with told them to look the other way, and when they look back, the person they were with looked completely different right down to their body? That is creepy. That is very creepy. But this gets even creepier. The article goes on to say that Dahmer then led him into the bedroom where the two sat on the edge of the bed and watched the film Exorcist III. While Edwards said Dahmer seemed to go in a trance-like state, chanting like a slow and rocking back and forth. Sometime later, Edwards said he hit Dahmer in the head and escaped. I do believe The Exorcist III was his favorite movie. He had an obsession with it. Now, I don't know all the scenes when it comes to The Exorcist III, but when it comes to The Exorcist I, it's very chilling that the girl in that movie, she changes. Her face changes, her form changes, so that is really an eerie connection. I don't know if Dahmer was a shapeshifter or not. You really don't know what half these people are in public. But again, it's kind of eerie to think about when you read this news article and then you read all these Reddit posts of people saying how Dahmer just looked completely different photo to photo. Next up on the iceberg, we have the Christine Skubish apparition. On June 6, 1994, 23-year-old Christine Skubish and her 3-year-old son, Nick, were driving along Highway 50 in the Sierra Nevada mountain range in California when they vanished without a trace. Christine had a lot going for her in her life. Not only did she recently earn her paralegal certification, but she was also hopeful about marrying Nick's father. She left her family's home near Sacramento on June 5, 1994, headed for Carson City, Nevada. She was reported missing on June 8th by her stepfather, Dave Stauchenbach, who called police to make a missing persons report on her disappearance. An investigation began into the case, but no leads initially turned up. Police, investigators, and her own family left no stone unturned. They were tracing her steps, driving up and down Highway 50. 5 days after Christine and Nick disappeared, and still no clues or hints as to where they could have gone, a woman named Deborah Hoyt and her husband were driving along Highway 50 late at night. They were singing to keep themselves awake, when suddenly Deborah saw a naked woman laying on the side of the road. The woman was laying on her side, her knees were slightly bent, she had one arm underneath her head and another arm on her head. The Hoyts were completely dumbfounded. They thought it may have been an obscene practical joke or a trap to hijack their car. They stopped at the nearest phone booth to call the police. Within minutes, 2 cruisers were at the site where Deborah had seen the woman's body. However, without a landmark to pinpoint the exact location, the authorities found nothing. The Hoyts and the police, they kept driving up and down Highway 50 to once again see if they could find the body that the Hoyts had recently discovered. They eventually had to give up the search. However, the next morning, some began to suspect that the sighting had something to do with the disappearance of Christine and Nick. At the urging of their families, Deputy Rich Strasser decided to investigate further. He figured that it might be easier to spot something in the daylight. Deborah had pinpointed a dangerous stretch of Highway 50 known as Bullion Bend. As Strasser drove in the area, he noticed a child's black tennis shoe on the side of the road. The area next to it was a steep embankment. He decided to pull over and search there further. At the bottom of the ravine, he discovered the twisted remains of Christine's car. He was able to find Christine inside the car, but he was able to determine she was no longer alive. So he went over to the passenger side to check Nick, who was laying there in a fetal position naked. Strasser assumed that Nick had also passed away. However, after he touched his neck to find a pulse, Nick took a breath. Strasser immediately called for an ambulance. Nick had been alone in the car for 5 days. Police believe that sometime after 2 a.m. on June 6, Christine fell asleep at the wheel. She drove off the road and crashed her car at the bottom of the ravine. Due to the incline, motorists drove past the accident scene for days, unaware of it. What is interesting is that nobody knows how the boy's shoe ended up on the side of the road. Strasser said he spotted the boy's tennis shoe on the side of the highway Saturday, and then he found the car. He believes that the boy at some point climbed from the car to the highway and then returned to the car. That is the only explanation for the shoe being on the road. Christine, her life was ended instantly due to the crash. Nick was all alone with no way out and no one to talk to. Christine's mother believes he spent the time talking to her, unaware she was no longer alive. Against all odds, he had survived 5 days of blistering heat and 4 nights of cold, dark solitude. Doctors who examined him believe that he would only have an hour or 2 left to live if he had not been rescued. For many, the strange circumstances that saved Nick's life seem to defy explanation. If Deborah had not seen the naked woman, he would not have survived. It seemed impossible for that to have been Christine, as she was still fully clothed and wearing her seatbelt. Furthermore, Strasser believes that the woman likely was ended on impact. Deborah is certain that she saw a naked woman on the side of the road. She and Christine's family believe that it was her spirit who saved Nick that day. Police led an investigation. They even used search dogs to find this naked woman, and they could not find her. Flash forward years later, Nick, now as an adult, was interviewed. He described a bright light surrounding their car following the accident. He also recalled seeing the figure of a woman standing near the road. He believed that Christine was watching over him following the accident. It was also mentioned that Christine's aunt had several dreams about the accident before she and Nick were ever reported missing. She saw them laying in the car in a ditch. She also saw the number 16, which turned out to be the number for a mile marker near the accident scene. Given how much time Nick had left to survive, I have no doubt that something supernatural intervened to make sure that Nick survived that accident. But this isn't the only example where people believe that something supernatural intervenes after a car crash. One of my last videos, I even mentioned how there always seems to be ghosts that appear in photos right after a car crash had occurred. There was a news story that came out back in 2015, and I'm reading this from the Mirror. It's titled, "Lily Grosbeck, Was Car Crash Baby Saved by Mom from Beyond the Grave? Police Heard Woman's Voice." This story is eerily similar to Christine's. This article goes on to say that police who rescued a toddler after she miraculously survived being trapped in a submerged car for 14 hours claim they heard a desperate plea from a woman inside. But here's the thing, Lily Grosbeck was the only person still alive inside the vehicle after her mother passed away hours before. Police, they were able to find Lily and she recovered inside a hospital. The police department was quoted as stating, "We could see a person in the front seat and then we heard a voice saying, 'Help me, we're in here.' It was clear as day." Officer Tyler Bedoz of the Spanish Fork Police Department said. Police say Lily's 25-year-old mother, Jennifer, had passed away the night before when she lost control of the car and could not have possibly called out for the men to help her save her child. The article once again quotes Officer Bedoz by saying, "For 2 nights I've lied awake trying to figure out exactly what it could be. All I know is it was there, we all heard it. It was extra motivation." Like Nick, Lily was also on the verge of passing away had these police officers not found this car by hearing this voice. The car was upside down, and they go on to say that because she had been strapped in, she had been suspended above the torrents, saving her life. Again, the officer is quoted as saying, "We could see her eyes fluttering, so there was some life, but as far as movements or consciousness, there was nothing that we could see." The 4 officers and 3 firefighters formed an assembly line and transported the child back to shore. The first responders started performing CPR, and Lily later regained consciousness in a Salt Lake City hospital. Her condition has now been upgraded to stable, and that was, again, of course, the time of the article. But again, all these stories share a very similar pattern where a car accident will occur, and some people claim not too long after there is something supernatural that happens. Next up on the iceberg is the disappearance inside a voting booth. Back on August 23rd, 2023, news came out that in Argentina, a woman walked into a voting booth and disappeared without a trace. Now, news did come out, and the reporters, they were interviewing people at this voting area who were shocked that this woman never came out of this voting booth. Unfortunately, this news video, it's only in Spanish. It has not been translated. I will go ahead and link the clip in the comment section below for people that do speak Spanish, but the article does go on to say that a week ago, a primary was held in Argentina to elect the president, but in the city of Rawson, the most discussed event was not its results, but a strange incident at one of the polling stations. It happened when an elderly woman with completely gray hair came to the polling station open at Escuela 14 de Febrero School, Department of San Juan, local media reports. She walked over to table 698, put down her ID card, and then retired to one of the booths with the ballot box. A minute passed, another, but the woman did not leave the booth. People in this location, in this area, this voting area, they were adamant that they saw this woman go in, and they were watching this booth like a hawk because they wanted to get this over with. They wanted to go in and vote. In the meantime, other voters had approached and a small queue had already formed. People began to grumble and ask authorities to check what was happening in the booth because this woman was taking forever. She was not coming out. A group of military men watched how the elections were held at each polling station, and after people complained, they finally decided to go inside the booth. To everyone's surprise, they found it completely empty. The woman seemed to have vanished, and when those who were sitting at table 698 began to look for her ID, they could not find it. It had also mysteriously disappeared. What is even more confusing is that those who go to vote, they hand over their IDs to those sitting at the tables. This woman, she never came back to claim her ID. Matter of fact, again, nobody saw her leave the voting booth. Nobody saw her come to the table to collect her documents. People began to speculate that the woman might be a ghost, and the head of this precinct even said that magic might have been involved, or that the old woman might have been a witch. Some even believe that it was the spirit of a deceased teacher at the school or a resident at one of the nearby houses, and that she simply wanted to fulfill her duty as a citizen by coming to vote. The article ends with, "To all the skeptics, the head of the station said, 'Think what you want,' and added that both ordinary people and the military became eyewitnesses of this incident." Next up on the iceberg is the Hotel Virja Rositan photo. Many people are divided when it comes to this photo, leading to a great internet mystery. There are many that believe that this photo is the best example of a ghost photo, while others believe that this is just a trick of the camera, double exposure, and so forth. Reading this article here, it says these photos were taken by holiday makers in 1988 at the Hotel Virja Rositan in Malrock, Austria. On the last night of a holiday, they decided to take a group photo. they put the camera on a table and set the self-timer so they could all be in it. For the first photo, the flash did not go off, so they took a second photo, and for that it did. In the first photo with no flash, there is an extra person in the picture who they said they did not know. She is behind the glasses but in front of the other people, so it would be hard to fake in 1988, or so they say. Experts say she is 14% too large, but people are skeptical, and the suspicious bit is that there is conveniently a gap between the ladies either side of her so she can appear. The odd part happens to be, though, upon looking at the photo, it does not look like she's exactly between the two ladies, but she's on the table itself. Some had even suggested, with her appearing to be on the table, that she may be a cardboard cutout, but they also say that if they were holding a cardboard cutout, then light off it would reflect in a different way, so they say it's not that. The rest of the people who were in this photo said that they did not recognize this woman or where she came from. This individual says something odd may have happened regarding the exposure placement during the film winding and whether the lady and her size pose appeared in those other images. We forget that often photos will come out with half a frame exposed onto the next one, or similar foul-ups, in the photographic film Real Days. And look, that's definitely always possible. We cannot take that off the table. I just find it very odd, a very odd coincidence, that this woman is smiling along with the group and it seems like she fits in, but at the same time, she doesn't. Someone replied to that comment by saying, "It's nothing like that. Double exposures are so obvious fakes. This is nothing like that. That lady is in the picture." Another person says the ghost appears to be on the table. "I'm at a bit of a loss with this one. I've never seen it before, but I'm tempted to say it's authentic." And what's just eerie is that she's facing the camera, she's looking at the camera, and again, she's smiling along with the others. That is the consensus. People think it's either a really good fake or it's just a really good example of a ghost in a photo. But what do you believe? Next on the iceberg is the disappearance of Brandon Swanson. Now this video comes from the Paranormal Files on TikTok because he gives an amazing breakdown.
This case really disturbs me. So this is Brandon Swanson. He was a 19-year-old kid from Minnesota, and he vanished into thin air on May 14th, 2008. So on May 13th, 2008, Brandon finished the school year in Minnesota, and to celebrate the end of the school year, he attended a couple parties that friends of his were hosting. Now, at these parties, Brandon did drink, but according to the friends that saw him that evening, he never seemed to be incredibly drunk. So at the last gathering that he stopped by, he consumed a shot of whiskey, according to reports. And afterwards, a little later into the night, he told his friends, "I'm gonna go home, see you guys later." And he took off driving down the road. Now, interestingly, that evening, instead of taking the well-lit paved highway that would have brought him directly home, Brandon decided to take a network of country roads, unpaved gravel roads. And actually, this is the road that he ended up taking that night. I was just there last month investigating the area as a part of my new documentary about this case on my YouTube channel. So at one point along the way, Brandon crashed his car into a ditch. This isn't an actual photo of his car, by the way. And after trying to call some friends, he eventually called his parents for help. After a while, his parents got into their pickup and started searching for Brandon, but he got fed up with waiting, so he decided to take some shortcuts. He walked across a field, he told his parents he was hearing running water, and then all of a sudden, Brandon screamed out, "Oh, and the phone went completely silent. To this day, no trace of Brandon Swanson has ever been found. That evening, his parents searched endlessly throughout the Minnesota countryside looking for Brandon, but when they tried to call in a missing persons report on him at approximately 6:30 a.m. the next morning, the local police told them that Brandon had the right to be missing. He was an adult. But later on that day, when Brandon didn't show up back at home, the police actually started looking for him. Now, something interesting is that eventually they brought out scent tracking dogs to the area, and the dogs actually detected a scent. So it started near Brandon's car, it cut across a field, and at one point the scent trail led into the river, the Yellow Medicine River. But then the dogs detected a scent on the other side of the riverbank, meaning that Brandon most likely fell into the river but then got out, and they followed this scent all the way to a gravel road that was nearby where the scent abruptly ended. So like I said, I actually visited the area where Brandon disappeared from. This is what it looks like in the middle of winter. As you can see, there are fields absolutely everywhere in every direction. And right here in this area right here is, according to most reports and GPS coordinates, almost exactly where Brandon crashed his vehicle. People still to this day don't know if he took off this way or went this way across these fields. But one of the things that's confusing about this case is that Brandon said he was seeing lights and he was walking towards a city. But he actually wasn't near any major city or any hub of lights. And it's believed by some that maybe Brandon was seeing a red blinking light in the distance, like over here or in the other direction. A red blinking light that was on top of a local grain elevator. So they've been searching for Brandon for the last almost 17 years, and to this day, no trace of him has ever been found. Not a piece of clothing, his cell phone has never been recovered, and obviously his body is still missing. So let's go over some of the theories, and I'd like you guys to comment and let me know what you think really happened to Brandon. So some people believe that Brandon actually fell into the local river and drowned. But something interesting to note is that after Brandon was declared missing, local authorities installed gates in the river to attempt to catch Brandon's body if it came floating down that way. They also heavily patrolled the riverbanks and did deep dives and searches into the river, and they once again never found a trace of Brandon. Some people believe that Brandon was incapacitated or injured in some way. That's why he screamed out, "Oh shit." Maybe his phone was broken at that moment and then he died a natural death. Others believe that Brandon did fall into the river, but he got back out, he continued walking, but that afterwards hypothermia began to set in, so he laid down to rest and he died. But his body has never been found, no trace of him, no clothing, his cell phone, nothing. And they've thoroughly searched this area. They've searched, I believe it's over 140 square miles of area around where Brandon went missing from, and they haven't found a trace of him. So a lot of people believe that they would have found something of his by now if this is what would have happened. Another popular theory is that Brandon accidentally stepped on top of an old well or a cistern, fell down, and was trapped. They believe that that's where Brandon died, deep down one of these old wells, and that his body remains there to this day. But most people who don't believe in that fact point out the fact that most of the wells in the area are only around 12 foot in diameter. Impossible to fit a human body through. Minnesota also has some pretty strict legislation saying that if you have an old well or a cistern on your property, you have to seal it up or you're breaking the law. And according to authorities, they've thoroughly searched the surrounding areas that Brandon could have walked through in the area around his accident, and they've never found a well or a cistern that possibly, this could have happened at. Another popular theory states that Brandon may have laid down in a field to sleep. Maybe he died of hypothermia, but the next morning a local farmer got up, he got to work, and he accidentally ran Brandon's body over with a piece of farm equipment, essentially shredding Brandon's body to pieces. This theory states that the farmer would have then freaked out. Obviously, he might have wanted to avoid a charge or an investigation, and the farmer then covered up Brandon's death. Interestingly, those scent tracking dogs actually followed Brandon's scent to a piece of farm equipment on a local farm. And there is a local farmer who has refused to let investigators fully search his property. He's denied them the access that they need to do that thorough search. But I still don't think that that points to guilt. I mean, it is extremely bizarre, but I don't think you can conclusively say that that's what happened based on somewhat circumstantial evidence. Another theory states that Brandon might have been walking across a field when he came across something that he shouldn't have seen. Maybe he came across a drug deal, maybe he walked onto a farmer's property that was growing illegal substances, and the farmer, seeing that Brandon had seen all this, decided to act quick and killed Brandon. He then disposed of Brandon's body somewhere on his property. But like I've said before, that's all just conjecture. There's no real proof that any of that could have even happened in the first place. Other people believe that Brandon may have been being chased that evening. Maybe he owed these people some money, maybe it was a drug debt, so they essentially chased him down, they followed him, they put him in their car, and they drove him somewhere else to be buried. And there are other folks who believe that maybe Brandon was just targeted randomly by someone who was out at that time and decided they just want someone tonight. I've even read that other people believe Brandon might have been abducted into trafficking. So remember, Brandon's scent ended randomly in the middle of that dirt road. It's really bizarre exactly where his scent was lost. So there are some people who believe that maybe Brandon was hit in a hit and run type accident. The driver of the car might have been drunk. They hit Brandon while he was crossing the road. They then freaked out, packed Brandon's body in the back of their car, drove off, and that's why he's never been found. Maybe he's buried somewhere else, or his body was unfortunately disposed of by these people. Now, there are also folks who believe that there might be a more paranormal explanation to this disappearance. People who believe in the missing 411 theory, where people literally vanish into thin air. because that's essentially what happened here to Brandon. He just vanished and no trace of him has ever been found. So this has led some people to believe that maybe Brandon slipped into another dimension that evening, and there are others who believe that Brandon may have been abducted by extraterrestrial beings. In fact, there's a very famous case of a UFO sighting that occurred in Minnesota in the 1970s. Essentially, a cop was driving down the road. He saw this beam of light. The beam of light hit his car with the light. And after being hit with the beam of light, the guy who was driving the car, the police officer, passed out and he woke up later on after a time slip. Now, that's a documented story. It was on national news, and the car itself is actually on display in a museum in Minnesota. You can see the damage that this UFO allegedly did to this car. But some people claim that that's why Brandon yelled, "Oh shit," maybe he saw something approaching him, and then just poof, he disappears. And there are also people who believe that Brandon may have wanted to fake his own death. And they believe that maybe Brandon is still out there somewhere. I don't know. I really don't know what to believe in this case. It's all very, very confusing and just frankly disturbing how someone can just vanish into thin air. For my recent documentary that we did though, I actually went to the area where Brandon disappeared. I really hadn't seen other people do this before. And we waited until the sun set and we took a look at all of the surrounding areas. We even tried to retrace Brandon's footsteps. And the path is incredibly confusing and bizarre. There were some revelations that came from that video, things that I can't explain here because I'm about to run out of time, but it's some pretty crazy stuff. So if you want to check out the full documentary, it's on my YouTube channel. Now the link is in my bio here on TikTok. We go into great depth with the story. There's about 50 minutes of discussion about the case with tons of details that I couldn't include here, things that make this case even more mysterious. And we're doing all this in the hopes to, keep Brandon's name alive in the media and in the minds of people, so that hopefully one day we can actually find a solution to this case, because I can't imagine something more horrific than not only losing a child, but not knowing what happened to that child. So if you want to check out this video and support the work that we do, the link to it is in my bio.
Now, I really do like the theory that he may have been hit by a car. This person who hit him panicked and put his body inside the car and fled with it, or he could have been abducted by aliens. But we can't take off the table the fact that this farmer would not allow police to search his property. But it's also the fact that this farmer may have had something else illegal going on. Perhaps he was growing something else he did not want police to see. That's always possible. But still today, there is no information into Brandon Swanson's disappearance other than that very odd phone call, leading to another internet mystery. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to continue to see me go through this iceberg, please do subscribe. In any case, thank you so much for watching.